my name's Stephanie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to take a moment and try to get out of the way. What a great night to be at an AA meeting. Man, I love meetings. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not love meetings. I was not grateful to be sober. I was uncomfortable in my own skin everywhere I went, and I constantly wanted to drink. I was not happy to be here. But tonight I am. I've recovered from alcoholism. My sobriety date is November 30th of 2000, and I have a home group. There's a solution group up at, where are we, Cary?
We're in Cary.
We're in Cary. Okay. It's been my home group for just a couple months. And I have a sponsor, and she has a sponsor, and they have a sponsor, and so on and so forth. And I know for me, there's no way I would be sober today without a sponsor, without somebody to take me through the book Alcoholics Anonymous and show me the directions in that book, to show me that it was a textbook. And if I do these things, I'll get these results. I didn't know that when it said, we put this before us in black and white, that meant that I would have to write something down. Or when it said, we ask God this or that meant that I would have to pray. I would not have understood that. And so sponsorship has been very important in helping me get sober and in helping me stay sober by having a sponsor, but also sponsoring other women. So I'll try to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and two parents, non-alcoholic, and I'm an only child. And, growing up, I never needed for anything. I wanted for a lot of things. But I never really needed for anything, and I was a part of a lot of different things, and I had friends, but I never felt like I was a part of things. I was in all kinds of sports. I ended up belonging to a church. I did all kinds of activities that my parents put me into, but I just always felt just a little off center from everything and not really quite a part of. I actually didn't drink until I graduated high school, but growing up, I believe I was born an alcoholic, and I did a lot of things. I was very selfish. I was very self-centered to the point where it hurt other people in my life. I was jealous of other teammates, and I would tell people this to get them to think something different than what I thought they would think about me. And I was very into athletics, and I thought that a real athlete did not smoke or drink or do drugs or anything like that. And I told you that all the time. Everywhere I went, I was that person. And I was very involved in athletics, and I graduated high school and was terrifically saddened that I wasn't going to be playing any of the sports that I played in college. And so I graduated, and it was the 4th of July, and I went to this party. I had a friend of mine's, he had just gotten an apartment. He was going to be going to Ohio State, and he was having a 4th of July party, and I went to that party, and I never thought, going to that party, I'm going to drink, or I'm not going to drink. I just went, and I just drank. Like, it just happened. There was really no thought in it either way. And for me, that very first cup of beer that I had, I found a new freedom and a new happiness. Like, the world shifted into center, and all of a sudden I felt comfortable in my own skin. I felt like I could talk to people at that party without fear. Like, somehow I became this really great dancer. And it just, everything seemed to make sense. And it was a feeling I did not want to have end. And of course the keg went dry. And I was terrified of that feeling ending, so I went around the room, the apartment, and I picked up all the leftover cups of beer, and I just downed them all. I mean, here we go. And I got really sick, and I kind of blacked out for a little bit, and I got in a fight with my boyfriend, and I lied to my parents about where I had been that night and what I had been doing, and I felt absolutely terrible the next day, but I was so ready to do it all over again. because I had found that thing to help me find that comfort in my own skin. And I went to school that fall at a university in South Carolina and ran into some really great people. And at that time, it was hard for me to, get alcohol. I didn't have a fake ID or anything, but I ran into some folks, and I would drink with them at parties, and it was usually like, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night kind of a deal. And I don't really have any experience with social drinking, so every time I drank, I got drunk. Once I started drinking, I didn't stop unless something stopped me, which was either passing out or going to jail. That's pretty much the only two things. And so that first year, that's how I drank. I'd stopped drinking until something stopped me. And, I had a lot of friends that said, hey, maybe you shouldn't drink so much. And I had a friend that said, maybe you shouldn't drink at all. And I was not friends with that person after that. And I didn't really go to class very much. I was mostly thinking about where are we going this weekend, how are we going to get it, who's going to be there, all that kind of stuff. And that next year, my friends and I moved into an apartment together, and now I knew more people and I could get alcohol more easily. And so, I'm drinking probably 5 nights a week, maybe at this point. And things started to not be as fun for other people, as much fun as they were for me when I drank. And I started doing things that, I really thought that I would never do. I started smoking cigarettes. I started finding additional things that I thought would help me control and enjoy my drinking, which did not. And I started getting violent with people, and I was definitely lying a lot about where I was going and who I was with and what I was doing. Because, I know the difference between right and wrong, but I don't want you to think something that I think you're going to think about me if you know what I'm really doing. I'm terrified of how other people think of me, because I really mostly think about myself all the time. And I started becoming pretty violent, and one night I'm talking with my roommate out on our little front porch stoop thing, and I guess I didn't like what she had said, so I took my bottle of beer and I threw it at her, and she had broken glass all down the front of her. And the next morning I was just really grateful that she didn't know that it was me that had done that. She had, I guess, blacked out herself for a little bit, and I certainly didn't tell her. And things like this are starting to be really prevalent in my life. And that next year I moved into a house with these gals, and these folks that I ran with, really good people. Just lovely, decent people. And they, I'm calling them my best friends, and they're calling me their best friend, and I am not being a best friend to any of them. I'm lying all the time. And things really start to escalate in my drinking at this point. It's hard to get alcohol in that part of South Carolina on Sundays, so a lot of times we drive up to North Carolina and get alcohol. But so I'm drinking let's just say six days a week. I had gotten a boyfriend. He and I had been friends my first year there, and I just adored him and thought the world of him. And he and I grew closer, and so he became my boyfriend. And I cheated on him not every chance, but I ended up cheating on him quite a bit. And so things like this are going on in my life. And most of my roommates are going to class. I'm not really going to class. I'm really not going to class. And mostly, and if I do, I'm drunk or, doing something else. And all my roommates are going to class, and they're using their books. And to drink the way that I drink, it's really expensive. So I start stealing their textbooks and selling them for money, and then I take one of mine off the shelf and be like, yeah, we really got to lock our doors around here. Somebody's stealing our books. And they're just going on with their weeks like normal. And once I start drinking, I don't stop, and I'm usually the last one to go to bed. And so I'm up late at night. I'm by myself. I still need to drink. I still need to keep this thing going. And everybody left their doors unlocked, and I knew that. And so I would sneak into their bedrooms while they were sleeping, and I would steal money and drugs from underneath their mattresses or their dresser drawers, because I got to keep going. I'm not really going to stop. And so things are not going well. Well, that spring, my roommates were out of town, and one of our roommates had gone to study abroad in Australia. And when she was there, she got a mosquito bite, and she got encephalitis, and she died. And my other roommates are out of town, and I get the call, and it's like noon on a Saturday, and I'm already very drunk. And I get this phone call, and I think, like, my first thought is, I can't believe my roommates left me here to deal with this. Like, so self-centered. I never once thought, maybe I should call my roommates and let them know. Maybe I should let other people in this small college town know that this woman has died. Maybe I should call her parents and her family, or we should send flowers or something. I never thought any of those things. I just drank the whole rest of the weekend, and when my roommates got back, I yelled at them for leaving me there to deal with it. And so that didn't really end well before going into summer. And I went home that summer, and my parents had bought me a truck. I didn't have a vehicle at that point. Within 2 weeks, I had a DUI. And anyone would have seen that coming. And I, it wasn't really like any different. Like that night when I was driving, I think I leaned over to pick up a cigarette lighter or something like that. It was just like a little swerve, and the police officer stopped me, and I blew a 384. And my lawyer was very concerned about that, because I also remembered everywhere I had been and everything I had done that day. And so he was legitimately concerned. So, we figure out I should go to this 3-day driver intervention program, which is basically at a detox center, treatment center. And so I go to that, and I basically hang out with all the guys, right? Because I don't trust women, because I'm a woman and shouldn't trust us. And I hang out with all the guys. We're all joking about how we're going to get kegged when we get out of there. And this woman stands up one of the nights to tell her story. And she stands up, and she's much older than I am. I'm only 20 at this point. She's much older than I am. She had worked a third shift job, and she only drank keg beer. And I was like, I cannot relate to that. And I don't know what specifically it was, but she talked about the way she felt and the way she drank and the things that she had done. And I sat in the back of that room, and I just cried, and I thought, maybe that's what's wrong with me. And I didn't stop there. I turned 21 like a month later. But it was a small seed, right? It was a little seed that was planted for me. I turned 21, and I was an instant bar fly. I loved being at the bar, because what I thought is that it was a party for everybody to come and see me. There's a pattern here. I loved going there, and I would go every night, and I would go in the evening, and I'd stay until 2. And then pretty soon I found out, I'm going to start going for happy hour and staying until 2. And then I was like, I don't need to wait till happy hour. I can go when they're opened, like when they're opening in the morning. So I would go, and I would stand outside the bar, and I'd be out there while the bartender is arriving for work, and I would go in and I'd help them set up the bar stools and all the things, and I would just be there all day and stay until 2, or some dramatic situation happened. I had to run off to something, but everybody knew that I could get phone calls there. My grandma was sending me checks to her granddaughter that she was so proud of off at college. She's sending me checks to help me with school, and I'm cashing them at the bar. It's just where I lived. And so things with my roommates are not going well. And things with most of the people I know are just generally not going well. And I'm getting into a lot more stealing and some credit card fraud. With the credit cards I was using at the bar. And one night, I guess I was in a blackout, and I was at the house with my roommates, and I had said about one of my other roommates, I said, I wish she would have died instead of our other roommate that had passed away. And so that, I believe, was the last straw with her. And so, like, these are commonplace things that are just happening in my life. All my roommates graduate, they go on, they get married, they have children, they are lovely, productive members of society. I end up going back like another semester. That was a whole debacle. And I come home that winter break and my parents are like, yeah, so we're not going to send you back because you're like nowhere near graduating. This is getting really expensive. And, you know, and they genuinely thought that like this small town and this college and these people that I was with were my problem because I kept telling them they were the problem. Oh, my friends must have stolen my credit card, and that's why I have all these fraud things going on. Oh, and if that professor would have only done this, right? And oh, you know, just excuse after excuse after excuse. And so they, you know, gave me the benefit of the doubt and said, we're not going to send you back there. This is not going well for you. And they said, you can stay here and live with us at home, rent-free, get a job, earn some money, and finish your degree at Ohio State. Or we'll give you some money and go somewhere else, but we're not going to send you back there. Now, my mom can have like one glass of wine and stop in the same day. That's it. And like my dad can leave like part of a beer in a bottle of beer. So I cannot drink at home the way that I drink with mom and dad there. So I decided to take the money and I decided to move to Baltimore, Maryland because I had been there for a baseball game once and I thought it was a clean city. And like just no real reason. So I did. I moved there and I found a job at a restaurant in the Inner Harbor, very touristy, making a lot of money in the restaurants down there. And I finagled into only working lunches. And I ran into a guy that introduced me into something that I thought would help me control and enjoy my drinking longer for like 5 days at a time. And that was a very expensive situation. And I would make $200 a day at lunch. And I would spend $200 a day on lunch on drinking and this other thing. And pretty soon that wasn't enough. So I started taking cash advances out of my credit cards and I could get up to $200 a day. So now I'm spending $400 a day on all this. And that's not really enough. And then I get kind of lonely, and so I invited this boyfriend from South Carolina up. So he packed up his whole life. He was from that small town. Like, he packed up his whole life, moved in with me. He found a job working third shift in an adult bookstore, and I was like, that's great, because I never have to see you. But you're kind of like here emotionally, right? So I got that going on. I'm not lonely necessarily, but I don't have to be with you. And he's giving me like money for rent and bills and all that kind of stuff, and I'm spending that on what I wanted to do. And then that wasn't enough, so I just found like a ton of other side hustles. Won't get into all that. Found a ton of other side hustles that I was doing, and it just was never enough. It just was never enough. And one night he and I got into a pretty bad fight. We're at the bar, and he said he didn't like how much I was drinking, and so natural reaction, I pick up my glass and I smash it across his face. We're asked to leave. We go home. The fight ensues. The police are called. And I say, well, officers, I hit him first. And they said, great, assault with a deadly weapon. Come with us. So now I'm like sitting in this jail cell, and I think, I don't belong here. And I absolutely belonged there. I was a walking, driving felony everywhere I went. I mean, it's uncanny. I absolutely belonged there. Later that night, I ended up alone. I was with a woman, and then I ended up alone. And just this darkness fell over me, and I just had this moment. And at this point in my life, I'm like belligerently anti-religious. I mean, I will tell you whatever you believe in is wrong, and here's why. But I just had this moment of just such, aloneness that I think Bill describes the best in Bill's story. And I said a small prayer, like, God, please help me. Just something very basic. And I thought, maybe I have a problem with drinking. And so I get out of there, and I have like no tools for doing anything with that. I get out of there, and I drank that night. And so things with Dude are not going well. Everything is getting turned off. We're getting evicted. Power's been off. Water's been off. Like, the whole time I was there for months, I didn't shower. I didn't wash my clothes. I really liked to drink red wine. I would get off work and I'd buy 3 huge bottles of red wine and I'd drink those until they were gone or until I needed more. And I'm like bruised and bloody all the time because he and I would fight quite a bit. And I didn't brush my teeth, and I'm like serving food to people. Like, how delicious. Anyway, so he and I get in this like horrific fight one night. I thought I was going to die. He tells me I'm going to die. I somehow managed to get away from him, and I locked myself in the bathroom. And the police were called, and they come in through the front door, and they pointed guns at him. And when they did that, he jumped out the window. And we lived on the 3rd story. And so I'm in the bathroom, and I hear the officer scream, and I run out, and I look down the window, and I see him laying there on the ground. And my very next thought is, I've got to get these people, like, problem solved. I've got to get these people out of my apartment so I can continue doing what I'm doing. And they're trying to take pictures and a statement, and they're trying to call for medical help for me because I am just, like, really bloody. I have no regard for human life at this point, not his, and definitely not my own. And so they end up leaving, and I just keep doing what I'm doing. Now he ends up in a coma. He'll be blind in one eye for the rest of his life from something I had done. And everything is off now. Everything is off. I'm about to get evicted. He's in a coma. His mom calls, and she says, this is such a big city for such a small little girl. And it was like just the way she said it at that time that made me think I needed to possibly ask someone for help. And I was like just drunk enough to call my parents and ask them to come and get me. And my dad drove out. He drove a U-Haul out like within like a day. And he's packing up everything, and I slept all day while my dad's cleaning up, kitchen full of all these bottles that I'd always meant to recycle. All my domestic violence papers, paraphernalia, my cat that I'd neglected this whole time. Just he cleaned up everything. And he brings me back to Columbus, and my dad had looked up Alcoholics Anonymous online. And he says, there's this pamphlet, it's called Is AA for You? I think this meeting has one in the back there. And he said, there are a series of questions in here. You should ask them to yourself honestly. He's like, you don't have to tell me the answers, but just take a look at this. And so I tell him, well, I can say yes to like 4 or 5 of these, and these are the ones that I know he knows the answers to. And I knew in my heart I could say yes to all of them. And then my dad says, well, it says if you can say yes to 3 or more, you might have something going on. So I called central office, the intergroup office, and this person is so excited, right? This is brand new person to AA. They're like so excited. They're like, this is so great. There's a meeting tonight right around the corner from where you are. And I'm like, oh, see, tonight is so not good for me. And, I just was like, and I don't know what they said, but I know I ended up crying and I ended up going to the meeting. And when I went to the meeting, what I thought I saw were a bunch of elderly gentlemen sitting around a table with their eyes so wide and bright and open. And I did not feel that way at all. Now, there were many women in the room, because I got a big book, and there were women's names in there, but I don't know what I thought I saw. But I just thought, I can't relate to this, and this is not the place for me. I walk out of the meeting afterward, and a gentleman followed me down the street, and he said, hey, I'd be happy to pick you up and take you to some meetings and introduce you to some women your own age that are doing this thing. And I didn't really know I could say no. So he starts picking me up for meetings, and he's about 10 years sober, and his wife's an Al-Anon, and today I consider him my AA dad. And so he did. He took me to a lot of meetings, and I was not done drinking yet. So what happened was my parents, I enrolled at Ohio State, and I got a job, and so my parents would drop me off as they were leaving to work, because I was not allowed to be in their house without them there, for good reason. I was not allowed to have a key to their house while I was living there, for good reason. And so they would drop me off at campus, and I found a bar that would serve me at 8 in the morning on campus, and I would drink all day and somehow manage, by some miraculous situation, to get back to their house in time for this guy to come and pick me up and take me to a meeting. And so I went to all kinds of meetings very drunk, and nobody ever asked me to leave. They just said, keep coming back. They just kept sharing their experience, strength, and hope. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I wasn't dancing on the tables, so no one asked me to leave, I guess. But everyone just kept welcoming me back, and he kept picking me up to come to meetings. Now, at this time, things that with my parents are not going very well. I'm stealing a lot from them. They're calling the police on me quite a bit. One night, I pushed my mom down the stairs, and I told her, you're the reason I'm like this. And so things are not going well. And now I'm mostly sleeping in a grocery store parking lot it's like half a mile away. And so then, I don't know what happened, but one day I was drinking all day, blacked out for a bit, came out of a blackout, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm wandering around the basement of a building on campus with a whole bunch of money in my pocket that was not mine, a cell phone in my pocket that was definitely not mine, and I just thought, I just can't do this anymore. And I called somebody that I'd met in AA with that cell phone. So I called somebody that I'd met in AA. I don't know what happened. I think maybe they came and picked me up. I don't really know what happened after that. What I do know is that 2 days later, I'm sitting in my parents' living room, sitting on the recliner, and I have books in front of me as if I'm studying. The TV's on, as if I'm watching TV, but I'm sitting there mostly trying to figure out how I'm going to commit suicide. That's basically all I'm thinking about. I'm just sitting there for several hours. That's all I'm doing, is figuring out how I'm going to kill myself. Because what all the very well-intentioned, loving people who suggested that I don't drink didn't seem to understand is that being physically sober was so intolerable. It was so despairingly intolerable. And as I'm sitting there thinking this, the doorbell rings, and a woman from AA showed up at their house, at my parents' house. And she comes in, and I recognized her from the meetings, and she started talking about her drinking, and she got me talking about my drinking, and I think a little later she talked about God. And she became my sponsor. And my first 30 days, I don't remember a ton, because I didn't go to detox or anything. It was extremely severely uncomfortable, but I made it. And she took me through the book and took me through the steps really quickly. And I thought, well, maybe I would have these crazy thoughts, like either I'm way too much of an alcoholic that these people are not going to understand, or I can't be an alcoholic because I'm 23, I'm a woman, I have red hair and blue eyes, my name is Stephanie, and we are not alcoholic. And it's really because I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I didn't know the definition of an alcoholic. I didn't know the description of the alcoholic that our book has. I I didn't know that it meant that once I start drinking, I don't stop unless something stops me. And in the meantime, I always start again. And lack of control and lack of choice. And if I have that going on in my life, I don't even have to admit unmanageability. That just in itself is unmanageable. And I didn't really know that that's what it was. And so we were going through that, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. And we keep on moving through the steps, and we got through steps 1, 2, and 3. The next day, she showed me step 4, so now I'm working on my 4th step. And the obsession to drink was just constant for me. I mean, it was just constant. And I would be working on this 4th step, and I'm crying, and I'm tearing my hair out, and I'm trying to go to work, and I'm sort of trying to go to school, and I'm taking the bus everywhere, and I'm calling my sponsor, at different stops along the bus route between my house and Ohio State, calling my sponsor from a payphone, I just want to drink. It was because being physically sober without something substantial to replace that, to find comfort in my own skin, was just unbearable. But I got through, and I had done my 3 lists of my 4th step. I showed up at my sponsor's house to do my 5th step, and I'm telling her all this stuff, and she never once asked me to leave her house. And she sat there and she said, me too. And then she would say, this is selfishness, this is self-centeredness, because I didn't really even understand what those things meant. I didn't really kind of get it right sometimes on my 4th step, because I didn't understand. The only thing I understood was that selfishness was like a kid who has a ball and says, mine. I didn't understand how I could be selfish with my time. I didn't understand how I could steal time and worry from other people. I didn't understand how self really played out in my life, and how fear of what I would or wouldn't get, or what I would lose or what I wouldn't have, played into all that. I didn't understand that. And she made it abundantly clear, because I've been very thorough with many examples on this 4th step. And I leave there, and all of a sudden, my favorite U2 song comes on the radio, and there is color in the world again. I hadn't had color in my world. It felt just because it's so lonely and gray when you're in the middle of all that. And I went home and I did step 6 and 7 that night. We immediately started on my 8th step. And I called my sponsor 2 days later, and I was like, I haven't thought about drinking in 2 days. That was huge. That was huge, because ever since the very first time I started drinking on that July 4th party, I had not stopped thinking about it at all, ever. And I didn't know that how much my mind raced all the time until it stopped. And that was a direct result of doing those steps. That was not a result of going to 90 meetings in 90 days. Because I went to many meetings that never produced that result. It was a direct result of working those steps with that sponsor. And I start going through it, and I start making amends to people. And my experience was, other than my parents, there was nobody on my 9th step that wanted to continue having a friendship with me. And that was hard, because I was really hoping that I would be friends with some of those people again. And many of them said, oh gosh, Steph, I'm so glad you're okay. We were really worried about you. Just keep doing what you're doing. Have a nice life. Yeah. And there were many people that said, do not call me again. And I had to not call them again. That was probably the really hard thing, because I wanted to say, but just give me 2 minutes to explain. But I had to respect that, and I had to say, I understand how you feel. I won't contact you again. And I had the one roommate who I had said this terrible thing when I was in that blackout that one night. I had reached out to her. I had amends to make to her mom, like a lot of people in her life, because I was also a little bit of a stalker, not just with boyfriends, but also with like friends who wouldn't talk to me anymore. So a lot of people in her life. And so she had like heard that I was making amends to people, but she wouldn't contact me back, and I had sent her an email from my email address, which was like a Hotmail address. which I got in like 1995. And her email to me was like, it's something to the effect of like, you know, it's taken you a while to reach out to me, so please understand it's going to take me a while to reach back out to you. I kept that Hotmail address. Now everyone's getting Gmail and Yahoo and all this stuff, and I just stuck with that Hotmail address. 7 years later, she emailed me back, and she said it was selfish of her not to hear what I had to say. And she would love to hear me out. So I got to make amends to her, and I was really not very good at wishing her a happy birthday when it was her birthday. And every year I wish her a happy birthday and happy Mother's Day and a Merry Christmas and every single thing, regardless if she reaches out to me or not. And at some point, she and I were able to meet up in Chicago. She was there for a conference. Chicago is actually not very near Columbus. But she's like, I'm in Chicago. Is that close to Columbus? And I said, no, I'll come to meet you. And so I drove, and I got to see her. And we had dinner together. And then a couple years later, her husband was struggling with alcoholism, and she called and asked me to talk about it. And so I got to be there for her. And that never would have happened without Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'm going through the steps, and I'm working on steps 10 and 11, and like now it's going on, right? Because steps 10 and 11, from the minute I get up till the minute I go to bed, I've got something to do. I've got direction in my life. There's a guy that speaks out there who always says, like, he is an alcoholic who should not be left unattended. That is 100% me, and like I feel like those steps help keep me attended to. Which was great, and that was a hard practice to get into. Like, there are no tricks in AA. There are directions that we follow. But I needed a couple tricks to make some of those things become a habit. So what I would do is I was a smoker at the time, and so I would put my cigarettes on top of my big book under my bed. So when I got up in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking about is a cigarette, but I'd have to get through that big book first. I'd open it up, and I'd say the things, and I'd do my prayers, and I'd do all this stuff, and I'd put the book on my bed so that when I got home later, that book was right there. So before I could get into bed, I'd have the book right there, so I'd know, open it up, and I had to say this, and I had to say that. And I had little note cards with all the specific prayers and the specific, inventories that we do throughout the day to get myself in the habit. Because I'm like, none of us are in the habit of doing all this stuff when we get here, and it's a lot to do. 10 and 11 is a lot to do. But it was great. The whole point of step 10 and 11 is to clear me out of the way so I can be of service to you. That's the whole point of this whole deal, right? And so now I get to sponsor women, and so, I'm going through that, and I'm getting to talk to my sponsor about the women that I'm sponsoring, and I'm not thinking about me in that. I'm trying to find out how I can best carry the message. And to see women go, from that gray and that darkness into the light is, I never knew to want for that. I never knew that seeing somebody else happy about something would produce joy in me. All I really wanted to do when I came here was to get the DEA and the ATF and my parents off my back. Some other stories that go along with that. I wasn't thinking about anybody else. But the women that I sponsor, one of my sponsees that I still sponsor from Ohio, she just and her husband came down to visit on her way to see her daughter. And they stayed with us in our house. And it's amazing to see how her life has dramatically changed from the program. And, the steps enable me to be a daughter today. Like, my mom trusts me. I have a key to her house. And I don't live there, and she trusts me to have it. I got a key to my home group before I got a key to the house I was living in at my parents' house. And rightfully so. My parents had written me out of the will for a while. They wrote me back in the will. like, it's not about, what I'm going to get or anything, right? It's about, like, that trust. Like, I'm an only child, so it is a little weird to be written out for Will. Right? Like, it's a little suspect. But I remember, though, like, I had, early in sobriety, a little later, after I was a little more on my feet and a little, just better established, and I had, I was deeper into the steps. I had gotten an apartment. I wasn't living at my parents' house anymore. And I called my sponsor. My mom, it was really important to her that we have Sunday dinner together. And so I'm calling my sponsor, and I'm like, I have to go over to my parents' house. And she was like, no, you get to go over to your parents' house. There is no reason they should be inviting you into their home after everything that's happened. So I'm learning lessons like this now. I remember talking to the guy that originally first started taking me to meetings or whatever. I was in his car one time, and I was like, something wasn't going well, and I was like, oh, it's so unfair. And he was like, it's a good thing life's not fair. I should be in prison. I should be dead. But I should definitely be in prison, probably for the rest of my life, based on the things that I'd done. And it gives us perspective. The steps actually give me perspective and understanding the reality of my situation and the tools to deal with it. Because not everything is great. My dad, my hero, passed away a few years ago. It was the number one fear on my list. And it happened. And because of the program, I never once thought about drinking during that. And I was able to be there for my mom. He was her high school sweetheart. She had known him longer. I needed to be there for her. And I needed to be there for my aunts and uncles, who obviously also had a longer relationship with him than I did. And for his mother. And that's what I did. And Alcoholics Anonymous taught me to suit up and show up. It gives us the tools to be able to walk through life and deal with things. It teaches me how to be a daughter. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me how to be a friend. I had a lot of friends, but I was not a friend. And this program has taught me how to be a friend in order to have friends. It's taught me how to be an employee at work, how to not steal time from my employer, how to show up and work like the devil when I do. It's taught me to be of service. It's taught me to be a partner to my husband, which is crazy that I even have a husband. I had gone through through the fifth step and the assignment after that. I had created an ideal. How do I want to show up? What do I want to be able to offer somebody else in a relationship? And so, I wasn't that very good at that the first few years of sobriety. Let's just be honest. But I got to a certain point, and when I met my husband, I was at a point where I was finally able to look to see where I could contribute to his life instead of seeing what I could get out of it. And a few years ago, we had a baby, which is crazy that the universe would trust me with a child, or him for that matter. He's in the program, so he would not be upset by me saying that. And it's just amazing to be able to, have so many more layers of opportunities to be others-centered. For me, that's kind of the whole deal. If I have lived my life completely selfish and self-centered, the key to getting out of that and maintaining being out of that is to be other-centered. And this whole program, in my eyes, is how that happens, is doing those steps to get us to that point where we can be of service. And none of us do it perfectly. I certainly don't do it perfectly all the time, but it's an ideal. It's something to work towards. And I'm so grateful. Everything I have in my life today is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Absolutely everything. I'm really grateful to be here. I want to thank you, Chris, for asking me to speak. There was certainly a time in my life when nobody wanted to hear what I had to say, and I certainly didn't have any hope to offer. Hopefully somebody heard a little bit of hope here tonight. I'm grateful to be alive and sober. I pass.